Hey, 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 everybody. Today for you, podcast number 61. Today's podcast is titled Upside Down, You're Turning Me. Hey, 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 everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of your weekly Limitless Life Network podcast. I'm Dr. Pete Lombardi, and sitting next to me is my beautiful wife, Sandy Lombardi. Say hello to everybody.
Hello, everybody.
Doesn't her microphone just sound so much better this week? Last week it was better too. But anyway, we got the mic stuff all settled out, and this is the Limitless Life Network where we flesh out the limitations that are preventing you from reaching your goals and living the life you were called to lead. And we always want to start the podcast off by taking time to thank you, the listener, for tuning in and sharing this time with us. And we put together what I think is a very important one today that I don't know if the title really describes it as well as what the topics really are and the points are, but I think it's going to be super helpful to you. So, hang on to your seats. But anyway, share with other people, like, follow, share, hit the subscribe button, and so on and so forth. Let's get on with the show, right? Okay, so Upside Down, You're Turning Me. That actually just a cool title to hopefully get people's attention. There's not really, I don't think it really applies too much to the topic. But anyway, what's our backstory? It kind of just evolved, didn't it?
Yeah, I think on Sunday we took a trip out to visit our third boy, Timothy. He's out at Elam Bible College, and we met him at his church. And so I think part of our takeaway is from the sermon that a very young pastor gave, like 25 or so. I think it was his second time ever preaching, and we couldn't believe it. He was just phenomenal, very gifted at sharing a story and the word, and
he was even funny.
He was funny. He had emotion. He had personal story.
Yeah,
really
we were commenting, like, he touched on all the emotions. He had you like super serious and like almost sad, and then happy and joyous and funny and it was all super serious at the same time too. Really, really well done by that young man. You could tell he put a lot of thought into it. He put a lot of time into it. He put a lot of effort into it, and he had some really great points. And he used the book of Job. That's what he read from a lot, and a lot of people know the story of Job. And Job was a righteous man, right? So and everything was going Job's way. And this leads us into our first point. The first point is good times, bad times. That's the name of point number one, is good times, bad times. And Job was this righteous man, and everything was going his way. He had, what did he have? 7,000 sheep and 3,000 camels, and he had a ton of land. He had a lot of things. He had a lot of livestock. He was wealthy beyond measure, and he was a righteous man, meaning that he was blameless. There was nothing wrong with him. And until Satan struck a deal with God to basically try to tempt Job. And what he tried to tempt him with was he just basically took everything away from him. He basically took all of his possessions away, his family away, and then made him sick and have painful boils and so forth. And never did Job break. He never really broke and cursed God in the process. But he does eventually what?
He loses hope and questions why God would allow these things to happen to him.
Yeah, yeah. And then God basically says, "Hey, were you around when I made everything? When I put the earth together and so
who are you to question me?"
Yeah, basically, who are you to question me? Do you realize I know how this all works out. I've planned it all. I'm in control. Like, do you realize who you're questioning here? And but that's us, right? That's us. We get into those situations where we just question things. So good times, bad times, and the point here is it's easy in the good times, right? And it's really what we do in the good times really has a huge impact when the bad times come, and the storms are coming.
Right.
Unfortunately,
Everyone will. Yeah.
we're all going to face some trials in life. If you haven't faced many already, but most adults have faced several by now, and we're in our early 50s, so we've faced a few, right? And it reminds me of a quote that I heard a while ago, and that quote is, "The more you sweat in training, the less you bleed in battle." And to me, this is where I think this pastor was kind of going with this, is that your rhythms and rituals, what you're doing during times that are good, are going to either serve you in bad times, or you're going to wish you had done them. You're going to wish that your faith was stronger. You're not going to have the wherewithal to withstand those trials in a mighty way, where those trials could turn out to be a testimony. They could be, a success story for
Right.
you.
The pastor, one thing he spoke on with this point from a biblical standpoint is that every day we have to have habits and rituals that are pouring into our relationship and our closeness with God. How well do we know him? And he said, because it's not good enough just to be like, yeah, I believe there's a God, and it's like he's there, but I don't have this closeness. So then when that storm comes and you're thinking, how could this happen to me? You don't question that God is still good and that his promises still stand and that he's still in control and he sees the bigger picture, because you have this relationship that you've worked on and put time into and developed, so that was a really good point. Like, it's just not something that you can try to cash in. Like,
Right.
I have that.
Yeah, I have this token. This was my salvation token. I'd like to use this right now and cash this in. Yeah. So super good. Yeah. The more time, the more you sweat in times of peace, the less you bleed in times of war. That's another way to put that same saying. But that brings us to point number 2, which is kind of one of his points as well. And that has to do with controlling our emotions, like having emotional intelligence. So, what does that make you think of? Controlling our emotions and having emotional intelligence.
The one thing that I was thinking as we talked was not only controlling our own emotions, but reading the emotions of the person you're interacting with, engaging with. And that's a real skill. It takes time, reflection. Like, you have to step back for a moment and look at the other person's demeanor, right? Like, and before they can receive and how you're going to deliver, I guess, a message. You have an example.
Well, emotional intelligence, I think, comes from practice. I mean, you don't just all of a sudden have emotional intelligence. It takes practice, and this is what his point was. In these good times, you have to look at situations and see how you're reacting and what is your emotional state during these situations. Like, what would your emotional state be if? What would your emotional state be when? Right? Those times where things aren't going well or didn't go the way you thought they might go. Like, how did that impact you emotionally? Because we are emotional creatures, right? And that trumps logic in most cases. And I know in the sales world, they really try to get you to an emotional close to get you to buy something, because they know that that's how we're wired. We're wired to act on emotion, and it trumps logic many times. So, I think it's one of those things that has to be practiced. It has to be intentional, and it has to be rehearsed, so to speak, and in your mind. So, yeah. And that brings us to point number 3 that you're kind of starting to allude to, and that is gaining perspective and this is gaining perspective over our own self-talk, our own limiting belief systems. And I think we had an example earlier that you brought up actually, where you said something about your golf game.
I don't like.
Maybe you were talking about my golf game, actually. Probably. She's too kind.
No, we just said, well, what an example could be like, I'm not very good at golf. And that's a limiting belief that I might have.
Yeah, or maybe I have that, and maybe it's
That's
actually
why you won't go play with me.
yeah, and that's why it's
Or
probably
I'm
why
so
it's
bad
true.
you won't go play with me.
No, you're actually better than me. Maybe that's why I won't go. But yeah, limiting belief is that yeah, maybe I'm just not really good at golf. It's not for me, right? But the perspective would be gaining perspective on that would be like, well, if somebody were to step back and watch and say, okay, hit a drive. And then you hit a drive and it goes 200, 250 yards and it's straight. Wow, you can actually hit a tee shot. So, well, you're not bad at that. Try a wedge. And then you hit a wedge and it goes a certain distance. And maybe it's a little crooked, but, not horrible. And then, then let's see how you putt. Well, not real accurate with the putt, but, it's close to the hole. You didn't go too far past it. So looks like you just need more practice. It looks like maybe you could use a golf coach and some lessons and more time with it, and you'd probably be halfway decent. And that's probably the truth, right? I mean, I probably could become a decent golfer if I invested time, hired a coach, and really wanted to do it.
Right.
So, yeah, that's gaining perspective versus having a limiting belief. So if you can have the emotional intelligence to identify your limiting beliefs, and then gain some perspective on it. Wow, imagine what could happen there. Right? Okay, so that brings us to point number 4. And point number 4, what is that one?
Execute, execute, execute.
Okay, so this is a story, and it's not my story. I totally saw this, and I'm totally robbing this from this Navy SEAL. And this guy was describing what his job was as a Navy SEAL team member, and his job, he was called the breacher. So he was the one that's in the front of all these Navy SEALs that are ready to go in to break into a house or into some place. And his job was to go up to the door, figure out what kind of explosives he needed, go back, build the charge, build the bomb, go up, stick it to the door, install his wires and charge implement, put some electricity to it. And then as soon as he was ready, there were 3 words he waited to hear, and he had to hear these 3 words, and they were execute, execute, execute. And as soon as he did that, he'd blow the door to pieces, and then he said all heck would break loose. So nothing happened until there was that execute. And this is critical for all of us because too often we're not executing. And what I mean by that is that we're not doing our job to its completion. And everything can hinge off of completing things. Too many of us are putting the bomb on the door and then we're going to do something else. Or maybe we'll put the bomb on the door and then 3 days later we come back and we stick the wires into the bomb. And some of us are thinking about building a bomb, but then we've got to go do some other things. So what we end up doing is we start having all these incomplete things happening all around us. It looks like multitasking, and you're really busy, but you're not executing. You're not getting things done.
Yeah.
Right?
I was almost prideful of myself that I could multitask really well until I realized like it wasn't a productive way, of accomplishing or completing tasks. So.
Yeah. It also reminds me of back in the old days, they used to have these things called game shows. I think they still have a few of them now. But there was this one game show, and if you answered all the questions, you got to go into the money booth. Okay. And you would go into this glass enclosed room, and they would just dump in all this money, and they'd turn on this blower. And you had a certain amount of time based on how many questions you answered to grab as much money as you could. And when the timer went off, you got to leave that room with how much money you could grab. Mm-hmm. And most people, when they first went in there, they would just start trying to grab it all at the same time. And as soon as they grabbed a bunch of money and they went to grab more, they'd let go all the money that they had. And they would just keep grabbing and dropping. But the people that did the best were the ones that would grab one bill, grab it, hang on to it, secure it, grab another one, secure it, grab another one, secure it. And they would quickly grab as much as they could, but they would always keep it secure because they were taking it to completion. Because the only thing that mattered was the securing of that money so you could leave with it.
Right.
So that reminded me of that as well. So taking things to completion. So, and then point number 5 is what?
It is the motivational wave.
The motivational wave. So what's the story here?
Well, we were talking, we did a team training dinner at our house last Tuesday night. And it was really powerful to come together. The whole team around the table, brainstormed. Pete inspired us with, I guess his passion for chiropractic and helping people. And I think it just re-inspired all of us for the big mission of our practice. And we all left on this high, motivational high. And then on training at the office the following Monday, he's asked us all, like, what was your best takeaway or from the meeting? And we all looked like deer in the headlights, like that was 5 days ago. So we were just laughing and reflecting on how once we step out of that training situation or the moment of the high where you're inspired, how do you stay on that wave and not let it, dissipate over time?
Yeah. So it made me think of my surfer friends, right? Out on the West Coast, those guys that ride those waves. And, they're always trying to get that wave, the next wave, the next wave. They're always looking for the best wave, the perfect wave. And then they ride it into shore and then it's over, right? So, and that's really motivation. It's transient. It comes and it goes. So, one of our mentors, Lacey Book, she said that you're going to get so much information. You're going to be super excited, but walk away right in the margin, mark the things that are the most meaningful to you, and then just make an action list, like three things, maybe 5 things, maybe 10 things, but prioritize them. This is the first thing I need to do. This is the second thing I need to do, because that motivation will wane.
Right.
I mean, you can watch things all the time that motivate you and inspire you, but you also need to have action items. You have to have things to follow through with. So my suggestion, and I guess my quote from this whole thing is, fall in love with the process. Don't fall in love with the event, right? So love the process, not the event. Like, events are great. They're a lot of fun. But the process is where you need to fall in love, because everything happens pretty much in life in a process. So if you can fall in love with the process, then you're home free, really.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So anything else you want to add to that?
No, my brain is
your
thinking.
Big brain. Your brain's big.
I need to make notes and have journals with me, because if I had written down action steps in the moment, then there would have been
action.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he would have executed. Execute. All right. Well, that's all we have for this week's edition of your weekly Limitless Life Network podcast. Be sure to stay tuned each and every week so that you can stay connected, be inspired, and keep moving toward your best life by stripping away your limitations. And we will see you next week.